For me, this is not a time for celebration. This is a time for reconciliation, remembrance.
The measure of a society, of a just society, is not whether we stand up for people's rights when it's easy or popular to do so. It's whether we recognize rights when it's difficult.
This decision was wrong. It was a political decision made by the Prime Minister. It was not made by a court of law, and I think many people take umbrage with that.
Anger at the apology and settlement given to Omar Khadr continues to boil in this country. Opinion was already divided over Khadr long before the government awarded him $10.5 million for its role in his ordeal at Guantanamo Bay. Now, some people consider him a child soldier and others say he's a former Al-Qaeda terrorist. But a recent poll found that more than 2/3 of Canadians feel the multi-million-dollar settlement was the wrong thing to do. And the Prime Minister is giving contradicting reasons for why he settled the case in the first place. He's also under pressure for not having reached out to Tabitha Speer. She's the widow of the U.S. medic, Christopher Speer, that Khadr was convicted of killing in Afghanistan. Now we're back with round 2 of the Sunday Scrum. John Ibbotson, Katie O'Malley are both in Ottawa. Zane Velji joins us now from Toronto. So, Justin Trudeau justified the settlement a couple of times this week. So let's have a listen to one of the times he had to address this.
If we had continued to fight this, not only would we have inevitably lost, but estimates range from $30 to $40 million that it would have ended up costing the government. So this was the responsible path to take.
Now, that's Justin Trudeau giving one of a couple of different explanations for why he's decided to settle with Omar Khadr. I just want to make clear to the audience at home, the purpose of our political discussion today is really going to be about how the Prime Minister and the government have navigated this story and how the public has responded. It's not about what happened in Guantanamo Bay or in Afghanistan or who or what Omar Khadr is. This is about what the government has done. So, John, I'll begin with you because I read your piece in the Globe and Mail and you said that this is going to become a political albatross for Trudeau. You said the new Conservative leader, Andrew Scheer, will make sure that the Prime Minister pays the highest possible price for kowtowing to a young man that many Canadians consider to be a cold-blooded terrorist. What do you make of the Prime Minister's decision?
Well, 1 week in, it seems to be coming true. This is maybe the worst thing that has hit this government since the election because it reinforces the impression of some people that the Prime Minister is soft on terrorists, but on the other hand likes to cozy up to Chinese dictators. It's not a fair impression, I believe, but it is an impression. 70% of Canadians oppose this, and you can tell them that the Supreme Court had already ruled that his charter rights were violated. You can tell them that there was no hope whatsoever that the Canadian government was ever going to win this case. You can tell them that the facts of the case are ambiguous at best, and we don't really know how culpable Mr. Khadr was, if at all, in the crimes that he confessed to. They don't care. They don't like the guy. They don't like his family. They don't like the apology. They don't like the fact that he's getting $10 million minus the considerable legal fees that he's going to have to pay. They would rather have just litigated, as John Iveson said, until Satan skates to work, and paid out whatever they had to pay out grudgingly without an apology, because that's the way they view the man. I'm not saying that it's fair and or that it's true, but that's the way they view him, and they resent this government for what, as they see it, caving in. Politically, again, outside the facts of the case, politically, it is a major blow to the Liberal government.
Katie, I want to address something with you, which is the conflicting narratives that we've heard from the Prime Minister as to why he decided to settle this case, why he decided to apologize. One day we're hearing that it's the honorable thing to do, that it's the right thing to do. You do these things even when it's difficult. And then 2 days later, we heard the Prime Minister, including yesterday at the Calgary Stampede, saying, well, it would have cost us millions more to keep litigating the case. So in an article that Rex Murphy wrote for the National Post, he said, it can't be honor and expediency. It's got to be one or the other. And it seems that our Prime Minister is trying to pick which narrative is the most palatable for the Canadians.
See, I'm not sure I completely agree that those are two contradictory lines of explanation. I think they're two different. They're definitely trying to appeal to different concerns on the part of people who are unsure about this or disapprove of this settlement. But I'm not sure if they're actually contradictory. You can say that, yeah, it would have cost a whole heck of a lot of money to keep fighting this. We would have lost, and we would have been wrong to do so because you also got to protect people's rights. That is a legitimate and coherent argument to make. I think the problem is that the government, I think one of the issues here is that the government, the Prime Minister and Ralph Goodale, the Public Safety Minister, and Jody Wilson-Raybould, the Justice Minister, who were sort of the initial point people, you can tell they're not super comfortable with this. They don't love it. They know exactly how it's playing out, and they know exactly what the criticisms are. And I think that sort of hesitancy or reluctance might have led them to not come forward with that full explanation at the start, which is why now it looks like they're just coming up with new ones. But I think that if that was the position that they had clearly made from the very beginning, both the Prime Minister and also the ministers, I mean, would we still be talking about today? Well, we probably would, to be honest, because the Conservatives clearly think that this is probably the biggest gift they've been given to go after the government with since, again, as John said, since the election. But that said, I think had they been more thorough in putting that forward, it might have had more sort of traction with the public initially, rather than looking like they're kind of jumping from explanation to explanation when both things can, in fact, be true.
Now, it's not just the Conservatives who are upset. Zane, an Angus Reid poll suggests that more than 70% of Canadians oppose the compensation. They could have lived with an apology to Omar Khadr for his rights being violated at Guantanamo Bay, but they're not happy with $10.5 million being handed over to this man who is so divisive to the Canadian narrative. So how do you address that issue of just handing over the check? And it's also how the check was handed over. At night, cashed right away, and no one was going to be told about it until the information was leaked to the public.
Yeah, I mean, this is a troubling story for the Liberals for a few reasons. First of which, because the nuances of this story are actually quite complex. But the headlines of this story are so palatable and so easy to digest, depending on your perspective and your existing political viewpoint. So it allows for hate to be made on multiple sides, right? So, you can have the right or the Conservatives say, when the Prime Minister comes out and says, we would have, had to pay 20, 30, 40 million extra if we didn't settle. The issue that people on the right have broadly is not that we saved 30 million. It's that this guy should not have been paid in the first place. And then on the left, the Prime Minister can get easily outflanked when he starts putting a price to justice. Is there an honorable thing to do only if you save 30 million to do it? So this complication that they're in right now as the government is the potential to be outflanked on both sides. Here's what I think the saving grace is, which is I don't know if this is going to be a big deal at the ballot box in 2019, right? As a political strategist, that's what I'm kind of focused on is, can the opposition create enough of a narrative from this story that it would allow a significant sea change in 2019 at the ballot box? My gut instinct tells me no. And in fact, I feel like if the Prime Minister wants to take this story and put it as part of his narrative of restoring justice with reconciliation, the environment, international law, I think there's something to be said there around Canadian values. But my long-term effect is that I just think the amount of engagement on this story is temporal. But you best well believe that both sides of the political spectrum, to the left and the right of Justin Trudeau, are going to try to be exploiting this story to see if they can get it some legs past this year and going forward into a narrative.
There's one final point I want to address on this topic, because it's not just a matter of a political volley back and forth. Real people's lives were affected by this, and one person's life that will be forever affected is Tabitha Speer. Now, she's the widow of Christopher Speer. He's the U.S. soldier, the medic that Khadr was convicted of killing in Afghanistan. And the Prime Minister has said he hasn't reached out. And we're hearing reports that former Prime Minister Stephen Harper did. We're hearing that Conservative leader Andrew Scheer will, and he's urging the Prime Minister to do so. We've heard this Prime Minister say, you do the right thing even when it's not easy, even when it makes you uncomfortable. Wouldn't the right thing in this case have been to at least extend a phone call to her?
I'm uncomfortable with all of this. By the way, I'm uncomfortable with Stephen Harper inserting himself into this debate. Granted, the Liberals unjustly accused him of being principally responsible for this. Look, there were offences committed by the Chrétien government and by the Martin government, as well as the Harper government. So he had a right to defend himself. But dragging the widow of the person who was killed in this affair into the political mix, into the political narrative, is grubby and offensive, I have to say, and I don't like it
John,
at all.
She didn't he didn't drag her into this. She brought forward a case along with Lane Morris, the sergeant who is forever wounded as a result of that firefight in Afghanistan. They brought forward a case to an Ontario court saying that they're owed $134 million by Khadr from a Utah judgment. They were hoping that part of that $10.5 million the federal government has handed over, they're owed something. So maybe they would have had a chance of getting some of that.
And she had every legal right to go to court, but that was a legal decision that she made. It was a political decision for Stephen Harper to phone her and say, I just want you to know on behalf of most Canadians that we oppose this deal and we're sorry about it. That's how she became a part of the political football.
And this is also a political decision by Justin Trudeau to not reach out. This is deliberate, right? I mean, this is a guy who does not want to give any more legs to the story, and to know that you have this widow who is now publicly said that she may go after the money potentially being awarded to Omar Khadr, legally or otherwise, becomes a tabloid story in many ways that Justin Trudeau does not want any part of. So he's best to take the hit right now for not reaching out, rather than to extend the narrative and give more access points to opposition and others on this particular story.
Okay, and I'd just like to say, for legal reasons, Katie, I can see why. For legal reasons, I can also see why the Prime Minister, nothing good could have come from calling Tabitha Speer or the other victim. This is something that is before the courts. It would be highly inappropriate for a sitting Prime Minister to sort of insert him into that.